Hey guys, welcome to the Love Your Life with Misty podcast. I am excited for today because I actually have one of my favorite humans on the planet with me. I have lots of favorite humans, but she's like my most inspiring human, I think, because of all the things that we're going to talk about today. But I also get to have her as my neighbor. And well, I guess she's not really my neighbor so much anymore, but she's kind of still my neighbor. And she comes with me on lots of my adventures. She's one of those friends that is kind of up for anything, and I can just call her and be like, hey, Jakara, I totally want to go do this. You want to go do this? She's like, yeah, let's go do it.
Good.
I love it. I love it. So I'm excited to get to share her with you guys today because she has such an amazing gift bottled up in her parents and the way that she's able to kind of walk through the world with things that would probably cripple other people. I know for me, myself, being a caregiver, well, on a team of caregiving people anyway, for my mom was hard enough. I couldn't imagine having to do that with two parents. So I'm excited to bring you Jakara Hubbard. Hi, Jakara.
Hi, Misty.
I'm excited to have you. Thank you for popping on with me.
Yeah, of course. Anytime. My pleasure.
On this nice rainy day in Moni, right?
It's a perfect cozy day. I have my blankie.
It is a perfect cozy day. I'll probably be right there. Well, maybe not right there with you, but I'll probably be there in spirit with my blanket and cuddle up on the couch with the pups. So I get you. I totally get you. So before we kind of kick everything off and really get into all the things about your life and all the amazingness, tell me about your morning routine. What does that normally look like for you?
Morning routine during the week is I'm up at 5:30. I usually make my coffee the night before because I'm an iced coffee person. So alarm goes off at 5:30. I have my little dog, little Papa. I call him Papa. He sleeps with me. So as soon as the alarm goes off, he's pouncing on me, on my chest, on my face. He's licking me. He's ready to go. He knows that it's time to get up, go to the bathroom, eat something. Downstairs, I take care of him. As you'll learn, I'm addicted to taking care of everything else but me. So he comes first. He'll get to go outside. He'll get to eat. I'll grab my coffee out of the fridge, go back upstairs and catch up on the news and have some coffee in bed for maybe 5-10 minutes, depending on how long it takes little Papa to squeeze out a little poop. Sometimes it's a rough morning. Sometimes they're really easy. He's a dog with a sensitive stomach. So, shower. I am currently doing the plant paradox protocol that you know about. You've been kind of following my journey with that the last several months. So after I shower, get ready, get dressed for work, I make a green smoothie. Sometimes I'll make some eggs to go along with it. I'll usually, if my morning goes the way I want it to go, I usually have a good 15 minutes to sit, eat, let little Papa poop maybe one more time, see if we can squeeze another one out before I go. And then I'm off to the Metro train station. I catch the 7:15 out of Richmond Park, and that's about a 45-minute train ride into downtown Chicago, and a few block walk to there to where I work, and then I get started. The moment my job is one of those jobs, it's the moment I walk in, you hit the ground running, and there's no stopping until the moment you put your head down and try to run out of there at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I remember those days. So, so tell me actually a little bit more about your background, because you have quite a amazing background in just like your professional life too.
So, born in Joliet, raised in Moni my entire life. Grew up a country girl. Some of my favorite stories are about mooning goats and riding cows bareback and swimming in the creek, not the creek. We got to be very clear here. We're in the country, so it's the creek, not the creek. Mud wrestling with my neighbors and doing things like that. So I think I can fool the best of people, and people think that I'm a city chick. But definitely not. I'm a girl who enjoys watching the stars, being able to see the stars at night, which is why I still ended up in buying a home in Moni. I don't know, what else do you want to know? So that's where I grew up.
Because you have a very what did you do? What do you do now?
Yeah, so I'm trained as a clinical marriage and family counselor. Started my career in private practice. Had a really great opportunity to learn the kind of the family court system. So I did high contentious divorces and custody disputes with Will and Cook County family courts. That's where the bulk of most of my cases came from. Parents who were trying to gain custody, trying to take custody from the other parent. Maybe there's some child removal cases. Children were removed from the homes for a variety of different reasons, and kind of working some of those cases. Reunifications, working with some families who maybe somebody was incarcerated and then trying to reunify with the child, or like I said, some of those child removal cases, maybe they were removed and they were now working on regaining some sort of custody or parental rights again. And then the other bulk of my practice was working with adult substance abusers. And so I worked at an outpatient level for quite some time, and then went and did a very short stint in adult residential substance abuse. Had a lot of fun, in that short stint that I was there working with those clients. I think kind of watching their passion for recovery was life-changing. I always say, you don't need a long time in residential substance abuse work to learn a lot. And I learned a great deal in that short period of time, and got to touch a lot of people's lives in a very short period of time, which is a lot of fun. And then I ended up, now I work one of the most confusing jobs ever, trying to explain to people, but I'm one of the managers of a behavioral health call center. Our biggest role is providing behavioral health intake and assessment to kind of make a determination on the best level of care and helping people get connected to care in their community. That's a standard call, but then even though we're not a crisis line, because we're still a behavioral health line, we do take crises on a regular basis. So there's people who are in the middle of manic breakdowns, people who are calling in who are psychotic, people who are challenged with suicidality, homicidality, and figuring out the best way to help them get connected to care. Sometimes they're not connected to reality, and when you're not there with that person, and you're talking on the phone with somebody who's not connected to reality, it takes some time, and it takes some maneuvering, and it takes some patience to kind of be able to work with them. At some point, they were connected to understand that who they were calling and what number they were dialing, and so they're asking for help. But maybe by the time we answered, 6 seconds later, they lost it, and so we have to kind of help them figure that out. A lot of the people that I work with are, just starting their career in behavioral health, and so my role and the other managers is to really assist them in providing them with a lot of that clinical development and professional development, and how to be great clinicians. And that's my favorite part, is not only do I get to help clinicians become better clinicians, but maybe I can help clinicians find their path, because there's the more I'm in this field, the more that I learn that there's a million different paths for counselors, social workers, psychologists. The sky's really the limit, and figuring out what you want to do, who you want to work with, and how you want to do it is really up to each person.
Yeah. And actually, it's funny, because the reason I was super, super curious and wanting you to share that is because later when we're kind of talking about your parents, I kind of want to circle back to what you do and how it might have influenced and helped, with what's going on with you guys. So tell me about your mom. Tell me, like, start to finish, everything about your mom.
So Mama was born in 1949 in northern Minnesota. I think sometimes it's helpful when I talk about my parents because it may come up just in the dynamic of our family that I'm biracial. My mother is white. My father is Black. And so my mom was born in northern Minnesota, and was a high school math teacher. She spent the majority of her career at Joliet Township and Rich Township, and loved working with her students. That was now that as an adult, I look back on my childhood and it was like, oh, well, mom left early and in the morning to meet her students early before school. And then she stayed after school to be with her students. And my brother and she was just like, you guys got it. You know, I took care of you just fine. You know, at 6 years old, you guys are fine. My mom was a very passionate educator. You know, her philosophy was you can't be a teacher. You got to love kids first and your subject second. So, you know, she was a math teacher and she loved math and geometry and physics and things like that. But her biggest passion was working with adolescents and students. She was always kind of a quirky woman. She was always said things that she didn't want her to say. She definitely embarrassed us as teenagers, and just kind of had some quirky behaviors. And at about in our late 50s, early 60s, some of those quirky behaviors got a little bit quirkier. She started to they've been in the same house since 1986. The silverware's been in the same drawer since 1986. Even when the kitchen was remodeled, the silverware stayed in the same drawer since 1986. And there were some behaviors that we noticed, but my parents spent a lot of time traveling after they retired. And there was one time she came home and she just couldn't find the silverware in the drawer. The forks would end up in some other place. She'd get frustrated. She'd blame me for stealing her shoes, for stealing the silverware. We did a lot of testing. We took her to Northwestern, and for anybody who's familiar with the dementia, Alzheimer's path to diagnoses, it always starts with cognitive decline. It looks like their cognition is just not functioning that well, but they'll be fine. And we knew it was much more than just cognitive decline. Both of her parents had either Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. She's had several cousins who have passed from dementia. And so I kind of wanted to call bull on the whole thing, that this was just, we're going to go get a second opinion. And the struggle was, if anybody who's been in this process, you have to get the whole family on board in order to really get the care that the person needs. And so that was the biggest struggle, was there was just a lot of family discord. I was still living at home at the time. I was finishing my master's in counseling, and here I am, kind of pretty indignant, actually, just kind of screaming something's wrong. And I believed in early intervention, and I wanted her to have care now. And everybody else was like, she'll be fine. She's fine. She'll be fine. I don't know what you're screaming about. Stop being so dramatic. Stop worrying about everything. She'll be fine. Eventually, my dad, everybody else got on board. We found another doctor who was like, well, she's going to pass a lot of these exams, a lot of these mental status exams, because she's quite intelligent. And she's a geometry teacher, and these are spatial things that we're asking for her to do. We're asking for her to draw a box. She's been drawing boxes for the last 40 years. She knows how to draw a box. And so she isn't losing some of her skills, because those for her are average skills. The other person I can't draw a box. I've never been able to draw a box. The moment that I take one of those tests, they're going to be like, something's wrong because you can't draw a box. My mother can draw a box. She can draw a cube. You know what I mean? So, you know, this neuropsychiatrist was really helpful, and kind of, he still didn't want to put a dementia diagnosis on anything, but Eventually in 2014, she was finally diagnosed with vascular dementia. Essentially, she's had several tiny little strokes. She does have the amyloid plaque, which is synonymous with Alzheimer's. And that ends up blocking and creating some brain damage and things like that. So at this point, mom is 69 years old. She is unable to function on her own. She needs some assistance with dressing. Sometimes she'll need assistance with eating. Her appetite is she'll either forgot that she ate, or she doesn't think that she's hungry. Her language skills are diminishing. She can't really kind of keep a full sentence together. She can't really follow your sentences. But she's a happy old lady. She'll still smile and laugh, and she'll try to play with you, and she'll scratch your back. She'll still make some of her famous sound effects. She's zoom. Everything is zoom and things go fast. So she likes to use her sound effects still. Even if she can't always communicate, she'll try to use noises and things like that to kind of get some things across. And we just smile and nod, and like, we got it, Ma. We got it. So at this point, 69, she's definitely not functioning like a typical 69-year-old.
Yeah. And, you know, for you, this has been like a really long process, like maybe not so much for everybody else in your family, like you kind of talked about, but like you knew early on that something was not right. You kind of saw the progression. So talk to us like from a caregiver's perspective, especially from a daughter's perspective, like watching all this happen, watching it all unfold, kind of like the frustration and the dead ends with the caregivers and, you know, the doctors and different things. Like as a caregiver, what were your biggest struggles? Like, what did you do when times got really tough, and how did you kind of take care of yourself while you were trying to take care of mom?
Ha! Misty, you know my self-care is horrible.
We're working on
it. I would say that this journey has taught me a lot about patience. If anybody who's quite religious always laughs, you know, don't pray for patience because God will make you wait. I sure prayed for patience, and God gave me a mother with dementia. So it's challenging to work with somebody who can't always comprehend what you're saying. You'll ask her to do something or not do something, and 5 minutes later she does it again. And it might be something that's serious or puts somebody in danger. Don't turn on the stove. I asked you not to turn the stove on, and the stove gets turned on. You know, she likes to scream when I drive. It drives me insane. It sends me into this craziness. Ma, could you not scream when I drive? But she'll still do it, you know? And so having some patience and some understanding that she's not trying to annoy me. She's not trying to burn the house down. She's not trying to get us into a car accident. She doesn't remember she didn't even process the first time I told her 4 years ago not to scream when I drive, you know? So when I tell her now, she's not going to process it, remember it, or be able to change the behaviors. Who she is now is just what it is. As a caretaker, I've had to learn a lot of patience. I've had to learn a lot of humility. And I think one of my biggest things is I really want to make sure that whether it's my mom or my dad, that they never feel ashamed, that they never feel like, I don't know, you know, because I have to bathe my mom sometimes, and you know, and I have to help my mom toilet, and there's been times where I've had to get quite intimate with my mother, And thank God that my mom still has a pretty damn good sense of humor, even when she doesn't really recognize what's going on. I'll tell a quick story real quick, not to get too vulgar, but I had to clean my mother and, in intimate areas. And I said, Mom, in my efforts to not scare her and in my efforts to not make her feel ashamed, I warned her, that I was, going to have to clean her, and I'd let her know where I was going to be touching and looking, and that I would be patient and that I would work with her. And she says to me, well, if that's where you want to go, I've had 2 kids. And I was like, oh, thank God. There was like this moment of lucidity for her, that she, number one, remembered that she had 2 kids. And number 2, it was almost like she was trying to make me feel a little bit better in the moments where I was trying to make her feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
Trying to get me to laugh like, well, that's what you want to do. No, it's not. It's really not what I want to do. So, thank God that she still sometimes has these tiny little slivers of lucidity and still has a really good sense of humor about a lot of it. But I think I've just learned not to be too emotional, but just learn to just be nice. I think we can get very caught up sometimes in the hustle and the bustle and the rush. But I think caretaking for my mom especially has been one of those of, you never know what other people are seeing or what they're experiencing. And because my mother, if you look at her walking down the street, there doesn't look like there's anything wrong. But as soon as my mother, starts to talk at this point, you can kind of pick up that she's not really coherent or understanding things. And so,
and you know what, too, for those people that don't know your mom, like I have never met in the history of ever a woman so excited to go to the mailbox. Like that is like, you will see her going up and down her driveway, back and forth to the mailbox. It is the cutest thing in the entire world. And I've heard her was like this even before she got sick.
She was definitely the mail was when my mom retired was something for her to look forward to. She could get this little walk. My parents' driveway is about a 1/4 mile long. From the garage door to the end of it. So she could get about a 1/2 mile walk in, going there and coming back. And that was when she was in her 50s. That was her exercise. And I think that's just become her habit. That she's just going to go. She's going to go get the mail and she'll look and if it's not there, she'll go back out later and get it. It's almost like that's the one thing that she'll know. It's about 11 o'clock noon. I should go take a look and see if the mail's there. I don't know how she, remembers certain things or how she keeps some information and dumps others. I think that's just the amazing part of a brain, how it works. And when it doesn't work, how it's still functioning and working. What is it that says you'll remember to go to the end of the driveway to get the mail every day? But you don't always hold the image of who your children are. I don't know what that is, but it's remarkable to me.
Totally. Absolutely. And you know what, too, for people who are, maybe they think that your parent or loved one or whoever might be showing, the beginning signs of Alzheimer's or some kind of dementia, or what steps would you tell them to do? Like retracing your whole journey? Like if somebody came to you and said, sorry, my mom, my dad, my brother, sister, whoever, showing these signs, what do I do? What would you tell them?
So it's funny because I've had that. I had several old classmates kind of reach out to me, one recently as well, in regards to just kind of mental illness and in the parent in the first, just in general. I think some of my biggest advice is just be patient. You have to kind of wait for some people to get on board, but also don't stop fighting. I really look at myself as an advocate. I really, instead of like maybe a caretaker, I define myself as an advocate, and that's probably the counselor in me. I'm trained to advocate for my client, and I advocate for my mother. I advocate for my father. And that was what I think I was doing during that whole battle, was I was advocating for mom, even if that meant that I had to fight the remainder of my family. I was still going to advocate for mom. And it may not have come out in the prettiest way too. That's some other advice too. Like, this is not going to be pretty. Like, there's nothing that is going to be perfect or beautiful about this process. Like, there are going to be some missteps. There are going to be some moments where you think you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, but maybe it's wrong. I told my friend recently, if at this point we're now the parent, and you know what they say about parents, they're not perfect, but they do things with good intentions. And we're not going to do everything perfect to care for our parents. We're going to make some missteps. We're going to break when maybe we shouldn't break. We're going to allow things to happen that maybe we don't want to happen, but we do it in an effort to compromise. We do it in effort to kind of play the game. It's just not pretty. And be okay when it's not pretty. Be okay with the fact that you're going to have some discord with some people that you love. And hopefully the people that you love are okay with that discord as well. That the 2, 3, 4, 10 of you, however many people are going to take this journey with you, hopefully everybody's on the same board, of the same page eventually, of our goal is to care for this person or these people. We may not always agree on how to get there, or the path that we're going to take to get there, but hopefully we can agree on the end goal. And we'll figure this out on the way. It's to talk about some of the missteps we made. It was like we begged for the keys. We begged my dad to take the keys away from mom, and maybe we should have pushed harder. We should have had this conversation harder. And I think we bent and we compromised, and we said, well, you know what? Maybe we have to let something bad happen before everybody gets on board. And something bad did happen. Mom went missing. Mom went missing for 24 hours. We couldn't find mom. We had no idea where she was. And this is what I talk about when things aren't going to look pretty all the time. And God forbid something bad like this happens for somebody. And hopefully it's on a much, much smaller scale when we talk about something bad might have to happen in order for everybody to get on board. Maybe it's, they left the stove on and they burnt a hot dog. Maybe I hope to God that is the worst that happens, is a burnt hot dog. Please, I hope it's a burnt hot dog. Because sometimes something bad has to happen, I think, for change to happen. Discomfort, the counselor in me believes that just the only time change happens is when discomfort happens. And so the counselor in me, I think at that point said, okay, I know I have to push, but I'm going to allow for discomfort to happen in maybe another way. And everybody had some discomfort for about 24 hours. This is around the same time that my dad was diagnosed with his second bout of cancer. He was in the hospital for a week, had a kidney removed. So mom was already unstable with not having my dad in the home. My brother and I were caretaking. She was at my house. She was back at home. She was at my house. She was back at home. She was at the hospital. She was back home. She was at the hospital, back at home. Her world was really kind of in a tailspin of not having consistency and regularity. And my dad comes home and she gets up thinking she's going to drive to church. And, she never made it to church. She made it, 3.5 hours away on the other side of the state. That day, that journey for 24 hours, she hit 3 states, Illinois, Indiana, and eventually we believe she made it into Iowa and turned back around. But my advice is, some of those top notes, to go back over them again, is not going to look pretty. Be okay with that. Remain an advocate. keep fighting, and be okay when it doesn't look pretty. Be okay when bad things happen, when the hope to God it's just a burnt hot dog, be okay when you get the burnt hot dog. Be okay when there's a fight. It's going to be. Not everybody is going to accept this disease at the same pace. And being okay with that not everybody is going to accept this at the same pace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, your journey with your mom is something so remarkable and so admirable, really, to look at you and how you handled it. But you kind of mentioned it a little bit too, and I kind of wanted to keep it separate just so you can kind of speak to each. But all the while that you're going through this with your mom, things are happening with your dad too.
Right.
So now you have caregiving 2.0 because now you're caregiving for two people, not just one.
You got it. You got it.
Tell us a little bit about your dad and what happened with your dad and what's going on now.
So dad, so I always, try to leave a little humor in this. I always say my parents are together one person. My mom physically is healthy. Her brain is not. My dad's brain is healthy. His body is not. So together, I still have one whole parent. My dad functions as the brain. My mom functions as the body. And dad was diagnosed. So he had prostate cancer when I was in high school. Had surgery, cancer-free for several years, and ended up getting diagnosed with kidney cancer 2016. They went ahead and removed that kidney. He spent a week in the hospital trying to figure out, are we doing dialysis? Are we not doing dialysis? Are we doing dialysis? Are we not doing dialysis? And this was all around Christmas, New Year's Eve. Okay, another tip, by the way, if your parents are ever going to have a procedure, don't do it on a holiday. Don't do it on a holiday weekend. You can't ever get them out of the hospital when it's a holiday. You can't get anything done around a holiday in the hospital. So
that's what I always hear, holidays and weekends. If you ever have to go in the hospital, don't ever go on a weekend and don't ever go on a holiday.
Oh, it's the worst.
Everybody takes the day off. It's like, you guys will be fine. We're going to go.
It's the absolute worst. Everybody's just like, well, we can't get anything done because it's Christmas. Well, and so, and then a week later, it's New Year's. Well, we can't get anything done because it's New Year's. And so this was the moment where my advocate jumped up again. And I got feisty this time. With now people outside of the family. When I was advocating for mom, I got feisty with dad, brother, aunts, uncles. Now I'm feisty with doctors because the care that he received was just god awful. I'm fighting with insurance companies. I'm fighting with everybody to get my dad care. And when he comes home, so keep in mind my mom went missing on New Year's Day, 2017. On January 2nd, 2017 was my dad's first dialysis treatment, and I had to have him there at 5 a.m. I did not sleep that entire night. I got up at 4, rushed back to my parents' house, got my dad up. My mother is still missing, but we're going to try to keep going like business as usual, because my dad needs dialysis to live at this point. So we get him in the car. He's still sore and in pain from surgery and taking an organ out of your body. And we get him to dialysis at 5 a.m. And just a little after 5 a.m. was when I got the call that they found mom. And so now I'm rushing to try to figure out, I got to get out to Western Illinois to pick up my mom, but I also have to figure out who's driving my dad back home from dialysis. And so there's some coordination. Luckily, we've, my dad's side of the family's been amazing with support. my dad's brother and his wife and my dad's sister have been super supportive. And so people stepped in, came into town, helped me out, and at some point, talk about my self-care. My self-care is work. I got to go back to work. I have to be able to feel useful and productive. That's where I feel my best. Even though if you've ever seen me at work, if any of my counselors are watching this right now, you guys think I look crazy at work. But that's buzzing around, but that's where I feel productive. I feel worthwhile at work. And so eventually that was where I put my foot down in my self-care. Was it's been several weeks. I have to go back to work. I have to work.
Well, probably gives you a sense of control, like in a world where you can't control what's going on with mom, you can't control what's going on with your dad, you're just managing at that point and doing what you can. You have to have some kind of policy and choice in how you're living your life and what you're plugging your energy into. And that was another question I was going to ask you, was when those times got really tough, and like especially now with how things are kind of going and stuff, what are you leaning most on to kind of help you get through all the yuckiness?
Well, the elevation that you gave me every morning, I'm like bathing in it.
Elevation is a great oil. She came over to my house one day. If you guys caught my, what did I put it on Instagram? Maybe she came over and she brought me tortillas, because in the midst of caretaking both of her parents and working downtown and doing all this stuff, Jakara still is that friend that will come over and bring you tortillas.
Well, you're right next door to my parents' house. I had to go. I don't know what I was doing. Was I installing elevated toilet seats or something? I don't know. There's always maybe dropping off groceries. I'm like the grocery fairy for them. They go to sleep on Saturday. They wake up on Sunday and their house is full of groceries. So magic. What was that?
It says like magic.
Total magic. But that's to go back to the very beginning. It's my addiction to caretaking. It's like, I saw Misty had a subpar tortilla. I'm like, I need to get Misty this better tortilla. This tortilla is much better. And I need to make sure that Misty knows that there's a better tortilla out there.
And you did. And you absolutely did. And she walks in the door, and I had no idea that her dad had just had, his hip surgery, right?
Hip surgery. They were moving him to a rehab facility. We were trying to put my mom in respite care. Like, there was a lot going on.
Yeah, and she's telling me all this, and I'm like, hang on. I went upstairs and I got a bottle of elevation. I'm like, here, put this up to your nose all day long, because you're going to need it. And clearly it's worked. That's great.
It's working fabulously. So I think between my self-care has turned into the elevation, taking care of my body and watching what I put in, being much more conscious of what I put on my body as well. And I've always been fairly conscious. As long as you know me, I've been fairly conscious. And I think when I started working this job and then taking care of my parents, I went into a not so good self-care phase at all. I got very overwhelmed and I got into a hole, and I couldn't quite figure out how to take care of a job and my parents. And at the time, my big dog was sick, and just everything else was going on too. Just life was happening. And I was tired. I have a long commute. I have a tough job. I have all this stuff. And I was putting in things that were just there to soothe me, to increase my serotonin in a matter of a brief second, but really ended up just destroying my body, destroying my mind, destroying my functionality. And so I think the last several months I've been much more conscious about taking care of myself. I mean, actually, the last year I've been trying to get on the path, and I would start and then I would get too tired and I would just give up. And I'm like, I'm just going to go to Culver's and get myself another burger because that's what makes me feel good. And I'm not feeling good today. So what I put in, what I put on, I'm much more conscious of, but I've changed my reward system. I think that was the biggest thing. And instead of my reward system being junk food, my reward system is is meditation, moments to myself. As crazy as it is reading the news, I'm political and I love that nonsense. And I just get so immersed into it, even though my blood pressure gets high. And I don't know why I do it to myself, but there's something about it that is, it gets me away from, I think, some other nonsense, that I feel grounded knowing what's going on in the world. Even what's going on in the world might not always be good. I've always felt grounded in, I'm aware of my surroundings. I'm aware of what's happening. I'm aware of how I'm feeling about it. I'm aware of how I'm feeling about myself. Cuddles with little Papa are just the greatest too. He's getting better care because I'm taking care of myself better. I think my parents are getting a better piece of me because I'm feeling better. And also too, oh God, talk about advice, boundaries, folks. Like, even when you have somebody who needs you to take care of them, at some point you cannot always say yes. Like, at some point a no has to be a part of it. And it is the first couple times you do it, it is the heaviest guilt you'll ever feel. But figuring out what needs to be a yes and what can be a no is a big part of my self-care with everything. If it's not going to serve a greater purpose, I have to be able to say no. If it's not going to make that person's health, life better, it's not going to help me feel better, we're both just gonna, nobody's benefiting from this. This is just something that everybody's just expected to do. No, I'm not doing it. No, absolutely not. No.
Mm-hmm. To that too, like so with all of that, with self-care and setting boundaries and doing all of that, at least right now, what brings you the most inner peace? Like, what about your situation? What about caregiving? What about who you've become through this whole process, these different angles of self-care that you've been able to implement and learn from, and the different lessons? Like, what right now can you actually say brings you the most inner peace that you can just sit with and be like, okay, I'm good with this?
This is going to be very exposed for me. But I think what brings me the most self-peace is a sense of worth. I think when I feel at my lowest, when I wasn't taking care of myself, there was this loss of worth, loss of value. I talk about going back to work and feeling valuable and feeling productive and feeling though I can contribute. And so that's where I would run to often. Even when I got crazy, I would still run back. All of this has taught me, I think, my strength, my worth. There was a day, Christmas Day last year, I spent the entire day in the hospital with my mother, assisting with inserting catheters, assisting with some of the most god-awful things you ever want to assist with your parent. I think I was there with 16 hours in the emergency room before I finally caved and said, God, admit her. You got it. I can't. I'm not taking her home. What we're doing isn't working. And I felt so tired, but I got home and I was like, I can't believe you just did all that. Like, I can't believe. And I did it on no food too, because I didn't think that I was going to be there that long. I thought it was a UTI. We were going to get diagnosed, get some antibiotics, and I was going to be home by 10:30 in the morning. Like, nope. Nope. At 10 o'clock that night, I was still there. And I got home and I was like, I can't believe you did all of that. Like, you complain about, these tiny little things, but you just pushed through an entire day of doing things that people won't ever do for their parents. And that was like my superhero moment. I was like, oh my God, like, even if I'm not worthy in somebody else's eyes, like, holy shit.
You're pretty much a badass in mine.
Like, I can't believe I just did all of that. And I only cried, once maybe? Shout out to the nurses that day at St. James Hospital, Olympia Fields, because they were absolutely amazing. Because not everybody, I think that's a frustration of mine, just side note. The medical field and even the behavioral health field, like, it's interesting how many people, like, are afraid of my mother, won't talk to my mother, won't engage my mother, will try to engage my mother no matter how many times you tell them she can't communicate for herself. They'll still, but we need to hear from the patient. That's how the day started. One of the doctors came in and she was, like, really mean to me and was challenging me on who I was to my mother. And I think depending on the day, I look just like my mother. Other times, like, I look like total minority and I don't look like I belong to my mom at all. And so it depends on the day. It depends on who you're talking to. And this person was like, who are you? What's your relationship to this person? How are you consenting to treat them? And I was like, I'm her daughter. And she wouldn't let me talk for my mom. She was very dismissive to me. And I finally asked for another doctor. And I was like, this just isn't going to work. I said, if you're not understanding that my mother has dementia and I'm her daughter, then this just isn't going to work. And finally they brought somebody else in who was just, then the day got so much better. But always fighting, always advocating.
It's always an adventure. Every time I talk to you, you have and you have such a great spirit about it too. Like, just being able to kind of process through it and just, I don't even want to say look on the bright side of everything, but just listening to Jakara talk, like, she's not the complaining type. She's kind of like that funny reiterating of how things actually happened and, like, sort of finding the humor in everything. And just, it's just a really refreshing way to hear someone talk about something that's kind of so heavy. And, with you being in the behavioral health field, that was actually one of the reasons why I wanted to circle back to it, is you have access to a lot of different resources that maybe people who don't work in that, sector actually have. So for people who don't work in that sector and they're looking for resources or they're looking for places to help or even caregiver support services, what would you guide them to?
Two big things. One is the Alzheimer's Association. There are a lot of really, 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 really great resources, even on their website, and their hotline as well acts as a huge support. So you can call and kind of ask a lot of different questions to the people who run their hotline. Very similarly to ours, I believe their hotline is staffed with clinicians. So you can call, and if you need to have a event session and be provided with about 10 minutes of in-the-moment support, it's a great resource. If you're trying to find caretakers, they'll help you locate caretakers. If you're trying to find residential types of memory care facilities, things like that, daycare facilities, there's a lot of different options. But I think that the next biggest challenge that I hear a lot of people say is, everything is really expensive and I don't really know how to access resources for those types of things. So our government has the Department of Aging that a lot of people aren't aware of. And so you can contact the Department of Aging. There's, obviously different state divisions of things, and the Department of Aging can really assist you with understanding the Medicare benefit, and what it pays for, helping you locate resources, financial or not. And so I'm being able to kind of really understand what it is that you do have access to. Sometimes there's grants and monies or governmental resources. The Alzheimer's Association just passed, was able to get through a bill with our government recently to increase funding for Alzheimer's research, and they're now working on a bill to increase funding for local resources, including support groups and daycare facilities and other types of mental health resources specifically aimed at Alzheimer's and dementia. So those are some big things. Contacting, your local representatives, and even if you're not that involved in politics, there's things that I think are really important in regards to our politics that can really help us in this fight and being aware of kind of what's going on. There's a bunch of other different mental health care bills that are out there right now that are sitting that aren't necessarily dementia and Alzheimer specific, but keeping in mind of what's happening is really important, and making sure that if you're going to work as an advocate for your loved one, working as an advocate holistically is really important, because the sad truth is that this could be for those of us who are caretaking now, this could be us later on. And so advocating for your loved one now is advocating for yourself, and making sure that you eventually get the care that you need, and things like that. Support groups, Alzheimer's Association can assist with support groups. But overall, as a counselor, getting your own self-care, your own support, whether it's through support groups or whether it's through your own individual counseling, just as a counselor, just reminder, going to counseling, number one, you're not crazy if you go to counseling. Number two, you don't always have to go to counseling when you're in the middle of a crisis. You can go when you're feeling pretty damn good. You can still go, and that way you're learning coping mechanisms and gaining support for when crises do happen, because crises will happen. They just will. And being able to access care, there's a lot of different ways that people can access different counseling care as well. And one of them is if you do have an insurance plan, accessing that care through your insurance, calling your insurance plan and taking a look to see what their coverage is and finding a provider. I myself work for an employee assistance program, which is a great resource that a lot of employers provide for their employees. And so talking with your employer about, do they offer an employee assistance program, and gaining access to that program, you may be able to access free counseling sessions, whether that's 3, 6, 12, depending on your company. They may pay for a lot of different things for you that you can get for free. Employee assistance programs also offer other resources, like helping you locate care facilities and helping you understand how to gain power of attorneys and guardianships over your loved one. So keeping in mind too, there's a lot of legal challenges that come up. So accessing attorneys is really important. If you're concerned that your loved one is going to eventually end up with a debilitating mental health condition like Alzheimer's or dementia, I will encourage you to, while they're still capable, obtaining power of attorney or figuring that process out early on will save you a lot of time instead of having to go through the guardianship process, which will take you to court. You will have to go to court in order to kind of finalize the guardianship piece, and retaining attorney is probably the best and easiest way of doing that, but not always the cheapest. So there's some steps to take early on. If you're concerned, definitely get that power of attorney. It's made things a lot easier in our family. I think we knew, just watching my grandparents and my mom's family, we knew to kind of put some things in place. So my parents did put together a will and a power of attorney piece, which has made some things easier for my brother and I to be able to access care for my mom. When my dad was in the hospital and he wasn't feeling that well himself, and we were trying to figure out how to get my mom into respite care. Well, if my dad's incapacitated, power of attorney automatically drops to my brother and I, which made it a lot easier for us to go ahead and get some things done.
That's all like such amazing info. Like, that's why I love bringing people like you on this podcast, is not only just to highlight their journey, but also the resources and things that people might not necessarily know about. Because people who are just at the beginning of their journey probably don't know about a lot of those things because they haven't had to go seek them out. So getting those things in order at the very beginning is huge. Having some kind of support, even if they don't even know you, is ginormous for them.
Yeah.
So before we wrap things up, there's one last question I have. And if you were able to have anything being taught in schools that isn't currently being taught in schools, what would it be?
Oh, it would be emotional intelligence. I'm the emotional counselor. I practice from kind of an emotionality kind of standpoint. All of my theories are kind of rooted and based in emotionality in some way, somehow. And emotional intelligence is huge. And what I mean by that is we are emotionally ignorant. We are challenged in being able to say, I am sad, I am mad, I am happy. We resort to these things that we call secondary emotions that are more socially acceptable, right? So when I get my feelings hurt, I end up telling somebody I'm mad. When really what I mean to say is my feelings are hurt and I'm sad, right? But it's more socially acceptable for me to let somebody know that I'm pissed off at them than it is for me to say you hurt my feelings. And so it's really important, I think, that we learn at a very young age. And this was when I was in private practice. This is one of my favorite things that I love doing with kids. Not only because, as my boss says, I'm dramatic and overly animated, but it allowed me to help children. My animation and my dramatics allowed me to animate emotions for children. This is what mad looks like, and I'm mad, and helping kids really be able to understand what every emotion looks like, what it feels like, what it behaves like, and then being able to say, I'm mad, instead of stomping my feet and tearing my coloring up because you're mad at me, right? That's what little kids do. When they're mad at somebody, they want to hit them, they want to destroy something that they created. And then as adults, what do? We grow up and we want to destroy other people. We want to vandalize and we want to hurt people's feelings. And because I'm mad, now I have to destroy, because I never learned at a young age how to just say, you hurt my feelings. So I am a huge proponent of emotional education in schools, being able to teach appropriate emotional, or I should say healthy emotional expressions, emotional identification, being able to communicate emotions in a different way. I think it would save us a lot of damn time, instead of having to explore emotions when you're 24 years old. And
because it's trudged through like 30 something years of crap and stories, and it's just not fun.
Right.
It's really not fun.
Right. And then all of a sudden you're realizing I've been mad for 5 years, but no, actually I've been hurt for 5 years. And so I'm intrigued, and I would love to see what would happen to our world if we taught kids in preschool, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, elementary school, just appropriate emotional expression, just identifying the emotion and saying, this is a healthy way to express your anger, and you get to be mad, and you have every right to be mad. And I'm not going to take away that emotion for you, but here's a way that you can express being mad that gets your point across, and you're able to express it without having to damage things around you.
I love that. And I totally agree. I think, what would the world be like when that does happen? Because the realistic thing about it is like people like you and I who have these thoughts, are doing things in these different ways, or doing things a little bit more holistically. Like when you and I have children, we'll be raising very different children than someone who's still very unaware of their emotions. And, it's timing,
My child will be so emotional and dramatic. It'll be fabulous.
Oh, goodness. Well, I don't know about the dramatic part, but I don't know if my kids can play with your kids, Jakara. But seriously, though, I appreciate everything that you shared with us. I'm excited to get this posted and for everybody to kind of utilize all the resources that you shared with them, and your journey, and just the emotional vulnerability that you shared, because that's key. With people, you talk about teaching kids how to be emotionally kind of out there and sort of like exposed to healthy emotions. Like, it's nice to be able to see someone showing emotion like you when they're going through a battle, like what you're doing with your parents. And it's raw and it's real and it's authentic. And I think the world needs a lot more of that. So thank you. I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you.
All right. Well, I will see you soon. I appreciate everybody for listening, and I will put everything in the description in terms of all the resources and things that Jakara mentioned, and we'll go from there.
All right. Thanks, Misty.
Thanks. I'll see you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.